Hey, it's Luke. A few months ago, my dad was invited to a conference in Exeter, which is on the other side of England from where we live. And he wanted some help working out a good way to travel there from a sustainability point of view. I filmed myself as I was going through that decision-making process, and I'd like to show you how it went and give you some thoughts on sustainable travel. So here you go. To get to Exeter from the northeast, you can either fly or you can take the train. And I wanted to work out which was the better option, both practically and in terms of carbon emissions. Now, I know there's a lot of strong opinions when it comes to air travel and the environment. So I wanted to look at the situation completely pragmatically, in the cold light of day, to see if I can give my dad some advice and help him come to a considered conclusion. We need to make good decisions when it comes to these situations, and we need to make good decisions when it comes to climate change. So it's important to be thoughtful and open-minded about it. So with that in mind, let's see what we find. So here's the spreadsheet. The times are fairly straightforward. It takes about 3.5 hours to fly to Exeter and about 6.5 hours to take the train, give or take a little bit, but clearly we can see that flying is significantly faster. In terms of financial cost, flying is more expensive, £307 versus 102. And in terms of carbon emissions, I've looked on a number of carbon footprinting websites to try and get a sense of what people are estimating train travel and air travel to be for that journey. And you can see that the flight is about 10 times more carbon intensive than taking the train. Emissions of about 1/4 of a tonne compared to 0.02, 0.03 for the train. And there's a few other considerations here at the bottom, things like the fact that you've got fewer luggage restrictions if you're going on a train, in case my dad has wanted to bring knives to his conference, for example, or more flexible timings, and the fact that with air travel you can take more luggage, and the fact that it's exciting, or at least I think it is. In the end, my dad decided to take the train. In fact, he even said in a meeting with a bunch of his colleagues that he was not going to fly for environmental reasons. So, you know, good work, Jan. And a victory for good decision making. So I've got 2 points to make about this. The first one is to consider the environment when you're making travel decisions. Could this flight be a ferry? Could this flight be a train ride? Could this drive be a cycle ride or a walk? And I think if you ask those questions every time you make a journey, you will find that there are some journeys where you're able to cut your carbon emissions quite significantly, as my dad found travelling down to Exeter. However, I also want to acknowledge that the truth is that sometimes you have to take the carbon intensive option. Sometimes we have to fly on aeroplanes. My dad's done another trip recently, which is to see my grandma, his mum, who is in Cyprus. Now, you can't get the train to Cyprus. And I'm not going to be the kind of environmentalist that condemns you for flying on an aeroplane, because I fly on aeroplanes from time to time. I know that sometimes in order to travel to where you want to get to, you have to fly, and that's not your fault. And my thought about that is, the person who invented the light bulb worked by candlelight. Sometimes when we're trying to make things better, we have to use technology that is worse. But my challenge to you is to fly really well. So if you're flying, make sure you're using those emissions for something worthwhile. Treat it as the luxury that it is. Do really impactful things with wherever you're flying to. Make yourself a better person, experience the world. Don't just sit on a beach in Benidorm. We're better than that, people. There is a whole world out there waiting for us to explore. And if you do fly, then you should definitely check out some other ways to cut your emissions. And the ones that come to mind immediately are things about food. Eating less meat, and very relevantly, eating locally grown food, can cut your emissions by a lot, and that might help to mitigate a little bit. We're all waiting for a better way of flying, me more than anybody. But in the meantime, make good decisions, use your carbon emissions wisely, and keep cool.